Did you know there are almost 200 moons orbiting the planets of our solar system? Now, the very largest of these moons orbit the very largest planets, the gas giants, Jupiter and Saturn. As you can see, Ganymede, Titan, Callisto and Io, they're all bigger than our moon, and Europa and Triton almost the same size as the moon. So if our moon is only the 5th largest in the solar system, what makes it so special? It's the fact that our moon's size, in comparison to the planet it orbits, is huge. Let's take a look at these moons in comparison to their planets. Ganymede, just less than 4% of the diameter of Jupiter. Titan, 4.5% of Saturn. Titania, just barely over 3% of Uranus. Triton, well, that's getting a little bit larger, 5.5% of the diameter of Neptune. Phobos. Phobos is a special case. I'm not sure if Phobos is a moon. Truthfully, Phobos is smaller than Barbados, but it's counted as a moon, and it's 0.3% of the diameter of Mars. Now, let's look at the moon and Earth on the bottom line. As you can see, the moon is nearly 30% of the diameter of Earth. That's huge. That's 10 times larger than any other moon compared to its planet. And that's what makes the moon and the Earth so special in relation to each other. Now that you've seen the numbers, let's take a look at the size of these moons compared to their planets. Most of them look like a grain of rice on a big empty plate, except Phobos, who looks like a speck of dust. Yup, a speck of dust. Now you can see how big the moon is compared to the size of the Earth. Do you know if the moon rotates on its own axis? Does the sun rise and set when you're on the surface of the moon? Does the moon have a night and a day? If it does, how long is a day on the moon? And what about the Earth? If you're standing on the moon, do you see the Earth rise, travel across the sky and set? And why do we only get to see one side of the moon? So many questions. Let's see if we can find some answers. Do you know if the moon rotates around its own axis, around its north-south axis? Well, I can prove it does. In honor of Barbados becoming a republic at the end of this month, we went to the moon and we planted a big flag right on the equator of the moon. And then we took a photograph from above the North Pole of the moon. So you can see the flag right there on the equator, which of course would be the horizon because we're over the North Pole. On the first day when we planted that flag, you can see the flag is pointing down. By day 7, the moon has rotated 90 degrees, so the flag is now pointing to the right. On day 14, you can see from this photograph, the flag is pointing upright because the moon has rotated 180 degrees. By day 21, the flag is pointing to the left. And when we returned on day 28, the flag is again pointing down in exactly the position where we planted it. To understand why we only see one side of the moon, let's add the moon's orbit around the Earth to this motion. The moon rotates around the Earth every 27 1/3 days. Since the rotation on its axis and the rotation around the Earth take the same amount of time, the flag that we planted on the near side of the moon is always pointing at the Earth. That's why we only see one face of the moon, because it orbits Earth in the same period that it rotates on its axis. If you were living on the moon, would there still be days and nights? Yes, but the day and night would be very different from on Earth. A day-night cycle doesn't last for 24 hours, but a full month. That means there's about 14 Earth days of daylight and then 14 days of nighttime. And a full working day would be about 330 hours. But what does a day look like on the moon? As you can see from the photo, even in full daylight, the sky is pitch black and the stars can be clearly seen. That's because the moon has no atmosphere to scatter the sunlight and make the sky appear blue. Even the sun is a different color without the atmosphere. Instead of a golden yellow, the sun is a blinding white light. And there's no twilight at dawn or dusk. The light just appears or disappears suddenly as the sun rises or sinks below the horizon. What about the nights on the moon? What are they like? Well, there are two very different types of night on the moon. On the far side of the moon, the side that never sees the Earth, there's pitch black night, and only the visible planets compete with the stars. It's the kind of dark sky that Earth-bound astronomers can only dream about. And NASA dreams about it too. That's why they're building a gigantic radio telescope on the far side of the moon. On the Earth side of the moon, it's a very different experience. The Earth is always there, hanging in the same spot in the sky. But just as the moon has its phases, so does the Earth. This lovely NASA image shows us the new Earth, the crescent Earth, first quarter Earth, right through to the full Earth and back to the last sliver before the dark of the Earth. In fact, the full Earth shines 13 times brighter than the full moon. So on the moon's surface, you could easily read a book or sew a seam all night by the light of the Earth. If you're standing on the moon, do you get to see the Earth rise above the horizon, travel across the sky, and set on the other side? No, you don't. The Earth is always in the same position in the lunar sky. Today, tomorrow, in 100 years' time, the Earth will be more or less in the same place in the sky above that lunar rock. Day sky, night sky, the Earth will always be in the same place. That's because the near side of the moon always faces the Earth. So long as you are stationary on the moon's surface, the Earth will always be in the same spot above your head. But if the Earth doesn't rise over the lunar horizon, how were these iconic photos taken? Remember, if you're in the same place, the Earth will be stationary overhead. But if you are orbiting just above the surface of the moon, it'll look like an Earthrise. And that's what these photos are. Now you know the moon does rotate on its own axis. And there is a night and a day on the moon, and each one is about 14 days long. But you also know that the Earth is stationary in the moon's sky. It doesn't rise and set when seen from the moon. And why do we only see one side of the moon? Because the moon rotates around its own axis in exactly the same amount of time that it revolves around the Earth. So one side always faces the Earth. These are some of the mysteries of the moon that you understand now, but there are many, many more fascinating things about the moon. Some we know, some we're still discovering.